has already acted with the sanctions that were imposed and the referral to the International Criminal Court. A no-fly zone can be on the table, should be an option, but only if it's approved by the UN Security Council. That approval is necessary for a legal basis, but also because it would give them the international political legitimacy that's necessary for any intervention. Well, the downside, of course, is if the West intervenes unilaterally, it could be seen as some kind of a colonial or imperial intervention, and that will certainly play into the hands of Gaddafi. So intervention may be appropriate, but it has to come under international auspices and with the endorsement of the Arab League.
Are they perhaps scared that they don't know who they might be arming if the decision is taken to actually not try and implement a no-fly zone, but maybe just give weapons to the rebels?
Well, exactly. And what's the character of the opposition? Now, the rebels have formed a national council, and some officials are stepping forth. The former justice minister has become a spokesperson. So that needs to be clarified further. We need to know exactly what is the character of the emerging opposition government and what will be their positions. These things need to be known and communicated to the Arab League and to the international community before they can have confidence in the legitimacy of an intervention on their behalf.
Any chances of talking to Gaddafi?
Well, it looks slim at the moment. I do think a negotiation, a mediation should be another option to be considered. Of course, President Chavez in Venezuela has offered a proposal. He's not a neutral party, of course, but perhaps the Arab League or some more neutral party could intervene as a mediation presence and try to see if some negotiated solution could be reached between the rebels and the Gaddafi regime.
David Courtright, thank you very much for chatting to us here on Al Jazeera. Good to hear your thoughts.
Thank you.
Now, the UK Prime Minister has given his full support to Britain's Prince Andrew as the country's trade envoy, despite continuing allegations about the Prince's private life. For more, let's rejoin Stephen Cole in London. Stephen, what's this about?
Well, Imran, the Prime Minister, David Cameron, says the Duke of York is making what he calls a major contribution in his role and that no changes will be made to it. But the Prince continues to be criticised for his friendship with a convicted sex offender, Jeffrey Epstein. Paul Brennan reports.
As the UK's special representative on trade, the Duke of York, Prince Andrew, has spent the past decade travelling the world promoting British business interests internationally. Speaking on Al Jazeera in 2008, the Duke described his patriotic pride in the role.
I've taken on the business community in this country as a champion for them. And I believe it's very important that they should get the best advantage and the best opportunities, because our competitors in other nations will do exactly the same thing.
Achieving the best business opportunities can be far from straightforward. But Prince Andrew's close friendship with Jeffrey Epstein, the American billionaire convicted on underage sex charges in 2008, is highly questionable. And the recent emergence of this 2001 photo of the Prince with one of Epstein's teenage masseurs has further damaged Andrew's credibility. Consider this, though. In 2005, the German car giant Volkswagen was found to have been operating a $2 million slush fund to pay for brothel visits, Viagra tablets and shopping trips. And it wasn't until 2008 that Deutsche Bank told its executives that payments to prostitutes would no longer be regarded as legitimate business expenses. By comparison, the Prince's conduct appears blameless.
The reality is that many people in business are working in a world where corruption and prostitution are part and parcel of how deals have to get done. And this is the unfortunate nexus that Prince Andrew finds himself part of. But you have to say that he hasn't exercised particularly good judgment, particularly given the key role that the royal family has in representing standards in public life.
And that fact, above all others, is perhaps the most relevant.
The standards required of the royal family, of the monarchy, are rather higher than those required perhaps of salesmen for British exports abroad.
The Prince, fourth in line to the British throne, has endured a difficult relationship with the British media, and on Monday the Prime Minister's office came out and contradicted newspaper reports that Andrew's trade role was being reviewed. The Prince cannot be sacked from his unpaid position, But there remain some who would like to see him resign voluntarily. Paul Brennan, Al Jazeera.
The trial of the former French President Jacques Chirac has opened in Paris. The 78-year-old is accused of misusing public funds during his time as mayor of Paris from 1995 to 2007. From Paris, Tim Friend has more.
In typical style, Jacques Chirac always insisted that he wanted to be treated like any other person facing trial. But that's unlikely to happen. The 78-year-old, one of France's longest-serving presidents, seems to grow in popularity with the French public, who view him with a particular fondness, the envy of other politicians. This is despite the fact that he's the first former head of state to face criminal charges since the Fifth Republic was founded half a century ago. A judge is now considering last-minute attempts to delay the trial for being unconstitutional, but Mr. Chirac says he plans to appear if it goes ahead.
The French president has always maintained that he wants to explain himself, and he'll say this better than I, what he judges necessary to say.
The agonizing wait goes on for Jacques Chirac, but soon he will know whether he must face trial. This is an historic moment in French politics, the prospect of one of its longest-serving presidents facing a term in jail. He's now in fragile health. His wife, Bernadette, dismissed reports that he's suffering from Alzheimer's disease, but he may find a court appearance arduous. The abuse of public funds charges spring from his time as mayor of Paris and salaries paid to so-called phantom employees at the town hall. The money was used as part of Chirac's drive for further power in the 1990s, at the end of his 18-year term as mayor.
Well, he finished his term as mayor of Paris in 1995, and after that he won 2 presidential elections in 1995 and in 2002. Now, the French public was very much aware of these very serious allegations against him of corruption, but it's a cultural problem in France. I think the French press is not strong enough. It didn't do a good job of holding him accountable.
A civil action is being settled by repayment of funds. Mr. Chirac lost his legal immunity against criminal charges after he retired. If found guilty, he could face a heavy fine and up to 10 years in prison. But in practice, he would be more likely to receive a small suspended sentence. Tim Friend, Al Jazeera, Paris.
Staying in France, where security services say a cyber attack on the country's finance ministry was the biggest of its kind, the President's office was also targeted. Hackers stole classified information relating to the country's presidency of the G20. The attempts to take information from the President's office were unsuccessful. France became leader of G20 in November. It's thought the attacks happened in the last 2 months. Italian Prime Minister Silvio Berlusconi has undergone 4 hours of surgery. It was to repair damage to his jaw after a man threw a statue at him in 2009. He suffered a broken nose and broken teeth. The treatment involved a bone transplant and an implant. The White House has announced